Okay, so like I mentioned in the previous video, I hope you haven't spent too much time just working on your position running of the triads. That's an important element. It's an important skill to have if you haven't developed it yet, but we don't want to get stuck there. We're going to end up improvising based on how we practice and the types of things we practice, what we prioritize. As quickly as we can, we want to get away from position running and arpeggiating triads, and we want to start learning to voice lead with them. That's what we're going to start working on in this lesson. I'm going to share a practice with you in this video, and then I'm going to give you a handful of different variations that you can apply depending on how comfortable you are with the exercise itself. Before I show you the exercise, I just want to give you a little bit of background about where it comes from and some of the musicians that I know that work on this type of stuff, so you know that this is not sort of elementary school level music, because these are very advanced jazz musicians that take advantage of this type of practice. So the first time I was actually asked to perform this exercise was about 20 years ago at this point. It was one of my first jazz guitar teachers. He had studied with Scofield back in the 80s, crazy talented player, and he asked me to do this exercise in front of him in a lesson once, and I literally laughed out loud. I looked him in the face and I laughed at him when he asked me to do this because I thought he was joking. I tell you that because I want you to understand that when I share this with you, if it's an idea that you haven't heard me talk about yet, it will likely sound silly. It sounds like something that you would ask a kindergartner to do on a recorder, right? In school, it's not something that an advanced jazz musician should be worried about. But after laughing at my teacher, he let me know he was serious. I gave it a shot, and within 5 to 10 seconds, I was lost. And I realized I couldn't hang, and I quickly stopped laughing, and I went home and I shed this, and it was extremely helpful. Years later, I moved to New York. I met Mark Turner. I met Brad Shepik. I met all these incredible musicians and teachers that I looked up to and heard them talking about very similar things that they work on. In fact, I once shared this idea with a friend of mine who was struggling with a particular progression that he was trying to improvise over, and I recommended that he give this exercise a shot in his own shed time outside of band rehearsal. Scofield was nearby, and he commented saying that he really dug that and thought the guy should practice this. So I want you to take this seriously. No matter how simple it might sound, it will make profound changes in your playing, your mastery of the fretboard, and your understanding of voice leading. Here's the game. Over any given chord that we play, we can only use the 1, 3, or 5 of that triad, and we have to play in half notes. So the 1, 3, 5 of whatever the chord is. So if I'm playing over A minor 7, I can only use the A minor triad notes, 1, flat 3, 5, A, C, E. If I'm playing over D7, I can only use the triad notes of D major, D, F sharp, A. No matter what chord I'm playing over, I can only use the 1, 3, 5 of that basic root structure triad, and I can only phrase rhythmically in half notes. It sounds very simple. It's actually rather difficult. Mark Turner, when I hung out with him, actually told me he takes it one step farther. He starts off only letting himself play in whole notes. That's a full 4-beat measure with one note. I'm not going to go that far with you, but if Mark Turner's willing to do this with whole notes, we should be willing to do this with half notes. The beautiful thing, whether we do Mark's idea or the one I'm going to share with you today, the beautiful thing about this is that immediately, every piece of muscle memory, every riff you have, every scale run, every arpeggio, everything you have that you've worked on is gone. You can't use any of it. I guarantee not a single person that's ever going to watch this video has riffs pre-planned and worked out that they've transcribed, that they play, consisting only of half notes. They just don't exist, right? So what it's going to force us to do is to learn to listen to those notes and to focus on voice leading them through the different triads. Again, we're trying to get away from running the positions of the triad, arpeggiating them, and learn to actually create linear movement that carries us through the triads without sounding like we're just playing triads. So I'm going to go ahead and play a quick example of what this will sound like improvisationally. I'm going to actually improvise, okay? And then I'm going to break down and give you a couple of kind of riff examples, just so you kind of see what I'm doing to help you get started. And then at the end, I'm also going to show you some variations on this to help either make it easier and or harder, kind of depending on where you are with your own playing. But these are really helpful variations that will help you master the fretboard. Check this out. That's the gist of it. Nothing overly hip, nothing that I'm that proud of. It's not about creating the coolest sounding lines, it's about creating a linear movement that flows through the triads in a very smooth way. It's about voice leading. What's cool about this is that if we do it well, we don't even need a backing track. We don't need a looping pedal or a band behind us. I should be able to do this just with a metronome and you'll still hear the chord progression. Check this out. Okay, here's our click. This is 80 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3. If I'm playing in half notes, I'm going to end up playing every time I hit beat 1 and beat 3. Note, note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chord progression, it's still there. It's a really quick way to immediately take away all of your crutches, all of your training wheels, and to force you to just listen and voice lead. I'm just using pure triads right now. This is exactly what I was doing in the previous video when I was playing all around the fretboard, but I have no rhythmic freedom. I'm requiring of myself that I only use half notes. If you want to take it a little bit further and do Mark Turner's version and you start off with whole notes, that's fine. I think half notes is a really good way to go with this, personally. I would recommend you start here and then you can always trim down to whole notes if you want to. The issue I have with whole notes is that sometimes we want to be able to play 2 chords per measure and we want to be able to hear the movement with our note choices. If you're playing with whole notes, you won't be able to hear that because you only get 1 note. So start with 2 notes. That gives you 2 chords per measure. Or if you have 1 chord per measure like we're playing over now, you just get 2 notes for each chord. So an A minor note, an A minor note, a D7 note, a D7 note, a G major note, a G major note. Here are a couple of quick examples just to help you get started. This is not for the purpose of you memorizing these. These are not riffs that are worth memorizing. It's just to help you start to see some practical fretboard examples of what I'm talking about. may have noticed, I did this on purpose, you may have noticed that the first riff, the first example, was exploring the lower range of the fretboard. It was on the lower string set, very low down on the fretboard. The second riff was a little bit higher up in range. The third riff, or the third example, was all the way up here at the 12th fret octave in the upper register of our instrument. I did this on purpose because this is one of the first variations I want you to be aware of. Once you get used to this game, anywhere on the fretboard that you're comfortable, start with the area that you're most comfortable with first, and just get used to the idea of playing in half notes only using the triads. This exercise is an amazing way, an amazing tool to learn to get more comfortable in the parts of the fretboard that you're less familiar with. So if you came from rock and blues, like myself and many others did, and you're really comfortable on the top 3 strings up here at the 12th fret, you might want to explore down here, or the lowest position, or you might want to explore the bottom couple of strings, right? Anywhere that you find that you're not comfortable, you can use this to sort of excavate your voice leading potential. Again, you're not stuck with riffs, you're looking at movement on the fretboard. So that's the way I want you to start thinking about variations with this. The exercise itself is not going to change yet. I'm going to show you one other version of it in the next video, but right now, stick with the exact exercise. Just apply it to different areas and groupings. So as an example, especially if you're struggling, just put yourself in one position and try using only the top 3 strings. Here's a couple of examples of what that might look like. Notice that I stayed on the top 3 strings. I'm just exploring different areas of the fretboard, but giving myself less freedom of movement. So now I'm only playing in half notes. I'm only using the 1, 3, and 5, and I'm stuck in a very small area. Don't try and leave that area too quickly. Get to the point where you're in complete control over your ability to move there, where you can hear the voice leading, where you can see the shapes. By taking away some of your options, your note options, actually gives you a chance to get in and dig deeper into what you do have available. We can do the exact same thing, but on the lower 3 strings. This is usually trickier for most people because most of us are more comfortable improvising on the upper 3 strings. Let's try the bottom 3 strings. Again, I'm just looking to create freedom of movement in a very limited space. The more I can control this space, the more I can then go and create freedom in another space. Maybe you want to try 2 strings. That could be a really interesting variation on this. Pick any 2 strings. They could be consecutive or non-consecutive. I've heard Jim Hall talk about this in master classes, picking 2 non-consecutive strings and trying to improvise. Let's try that in this context. So only half notes, only triads, and I'm only going to use the 2nd and 5th string. No idea what's going to happen here. If it turns out good, I'll tab it out and I'll put it in as an example. But again, this is a very advanced way to try and apply this because now I'm having to look at how the notes want to voice lead and move on 2 non-consecutive strings. Very strange setup. Let's give this a shot. tricky. It's very challenging to play this way. I'm kind of keeping track of the voice leading of two separate notes. It's almost getting into like some Bach Baroque type music where I was kind of thinking of two separate lines and trying to voice lead one, jump to the other, voice lead that one, jump back, voice lead, voice lead. It's like two different things happening at the same time. So I would recommend that you wait until you're really comfortable doing it all around the whole fretboard, at least in consecutive string sets. Then I want you to try this other exercise before you do the Jim Hall style 2-string exercise. Try just one string at a time. Here's an example of what that would look like. This is a very worthwhile thing to do. I would recommend you do this before the 2-string version. The 2-string version I didn't plan on talking about. That just kind of came up because Jim Hall entered my mind while I was videoing this. I set out to talk about the full position where you can just move anywhere, the top 3 and the bottom 3, and then the 1 string at a time. Those are your best starting points. Those are the low-hanging fruit. Learn to move around within a position, learn to jump up and down the fretboard on 1 string. Then, if you really want to get experimental and break out of the box, then you can start picking non-consecutive strings like I mentioned that Jim talked about and explore the fretboard that way. It's still all built around voice leading. It's borrowing from the positions and the shapes we know, but breaking them down, slowing them down so that we only have a chance to play 2 notes for each triad, and then we have to move. So all we have left is voice leading. We have no control over rhythm. We have very little control over pitch in the sense that we can't do any scale runs, arpeggio runs, or riffs. All we have is voice leading. I want you to spend some serious time on this exercise. I cannot recommend this enough. I shared that story with you about me laughing at my teacher because I want you to understand that I thought this was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my life when I was first asked to do it. And then I realized I couldn't do it. As great a player as I thought I was when I was 18, I was already a touring musician, I was already teaching, I'd already gotten into a college, I was already gigging with great musicians, and I couldn't play in half notes, just with the triads. It's very difficult, and I learned an enormous amount about voice leading and the fretboard and triads by spending significant amount of time doing this. And then years later, met guys like Mark Turner and Brad Shepik and realized these guys are doing this stuff too. And then I recommended this practice to someone, and Schofield overheard me and said that he thought it was a great idea. So this is a worthwhile thing to work on, okay? Spend some time on it. In the next video, I'm gonna make it a little bit harder. I'm gonna give you a little more freedom, which is actually going to make this harder. So before you go to the next video, make sure that you can sit with a 2-5-1-6 and just go to town on it. Like, be able to play all around the fretboard. Your lower string sets, your higher string sets, the low positions on the fretboard, the high positions, 1 string at a time. Just trying to own as much of the fretboard as you can. Once it clicks for you, it's just there. Okay, it'll never really go away. If you can do this in 1 key, pick another key. Try it in C major. Try it in E flat major. Okay? Remember, don't worry about width. Don't worry about memorizing tons of complicated things. Take the stupidest, simplest, most elementary concept and dig deep with it. Okay? Like Bill Evans recommended, like Bruce Lee recommended, like Picasso, like the chefs. That's where the meat is. That's where the value comes from. That's where the mastery comes in, because we're just gonna add more interesting layers on top of this. So dig deep. Take the time you need to on this exercise, and when you're ready, I will see you in the next video and make this a little bit more challenging. Happy practicing.